My name is Tara. I'm 29 now, and if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever swallowed the bitter pill of disrespect, or felt the sting of betrayal from people who should have cared for you, this story is for you. This is my real life. They thought they had broken me, stripped me of my husband, my security, even my name, and left me with nothing but the dust motes dancing in the one-room apartment they couldn't take. I remember standing there, staring at the empty spaces where his things used to be, and hearing Mrs. Whitmore's voice ringing in my ears. A charity case, always a charity case. I thought the grief would consume me. I thought the fury would swallow me whole. But fury, I discovered, is a fuel. It's an ember. And when you feed it, when you tend it, it doesn't just keep you warm. It helps you forge a destiny so brilliant, so utterly undeniable, that the very people who tried to bury you end up buying a piece of your success, completely unaware it was built on their cruelty. This isn't just a story about getting even. This is the story of how I made the Whitmores pay for every sneer, every insult, every act of calculated malice, by selling them the one thing they valued more than anything: exclusivity. I know so many of you connect with stories of people finding their power, and I truly hope sharing mine helps someone else realize they have that power inside them too. Before we dive into the deep end of the drama, if you are new here, or if you simply believe that justice is a dish best served sparkling and expensive, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It truly helps my story reach more people who might need to hear it. This is a long story. It took years to live, and it'll take nearly an hour to tell you all the details, the sleepless nights, and the sheer white-hot determination it took to get here. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's begin the tale of the Whitmores, the family who tried to erase me and the empire I built in their shatter. My relationship with the Whitmores began with a silent, mutual understanding. I was the anomaly. I was the rough-cut stone, their perfect diamond of a son. Andrew had somehow become obsessed with. Andrew and I met in college. He was the golden boy, destined for the family's investment firm, a future paved with inherited money and impeccable connections. I was working 2 jobs just to cover my tuition. We fell madly in love, the kind that feels like an irreversible collision. When Andrew introduced me to his parents, Thomas and Evelyn Whitmore, the air in their penthouse instantly chilled. Their home wasn't just wealthy. It was a museum of old money. Every chair, every painting, whispered of generations of superiority. Evelyn, Mrs. Whitmore, was the architect of my misery. She was a perfectly preserved woman in her early 60s, whose signature look was a silk scarf and a sneer. She never yelled. That would be gauche. Instead, she'd deploy surgical strikes disguised as concern. I remember one dinner party, the first I'd attended. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. I had saved for months to buy a simple black dress that I thought was elegant. Evelyn looked me up and down, a tiny, almost imperceptible flick of her wrist dismissing my choice. "Andrew, darling," she'd purr, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Does Tara know how to pair a suitable wine? We simply must have her over for proper lessons." Or later, during the receiving line, she'd look at my dress and comment, "Oh, Tara, that dress is enthusiastic. So brave of you to wear something so brightly colored." The way she emphasized enthusiastic made me feel like a child wearing oversized crayon drawings. It meant very clearly, it's cheap. It doesn't belong here. The cruelest one, the one that stuck like a barb under the skin, came during our engagement party. I had stepped into the hallway to catch my breath and overheard her talking to one of her closest friends, a woman draped in diamonds named Caroline. Evelyn had smiled thinly, adjusting her own necklace, and said, "Don't fret, darling. He'll get over the infatuation. She's just our little charity case." I was 22 then, young enough to feel the shame burn through me, staining my cheeks bright red, but old enough to stuff it down for the sake of the man I loved. My stomach twisted into a knot, a physical tightening I would feel for years whenever I was near them. Andrew, bless his heart, tried to run interference, always excusing their behavior as their eccentric way of showing affection. He was emotionally neutered by his parents' wealth and expectations, a common mistake among the privileged. We married. The tension became our marital wallpaper. Every holiday, every dinner party was an emotional gauntlet where I had to prove I was worthy of their son's benevolence. I started monitoring my words, my posture, even the way I held my fork, constantly trying to shrink myself to fit their tiny, suffocating box of acceptance. The effort was exhausting. Then the unimaginable happened. Andrew died in a boating accident. It was sudden, senseless, and absolutely devastating. I was 27, a widow, utterly lost. The raw, animalistic grief was a physical weight, pressing the air out of my lungs, making the world dull and meaningless. I walked through the days in a fog of silence and crushing heartache. The Whitmore's grief, however, was immediately organized and weaponized. The very next day after the funeral, before I'd even had a moment alone with my husband's memory, a tailored black suit, a lawyer, appeared at my small rented apartment. He handed me a crisp card and told me I was required at the family office the following week. I sat across the wide mahogany table from Thomas Whitmore, Evelyn, and the silent lawyer. The office smelled sterile, like expensive leather and old betrayal. My hands were clammy. I was still wearing the black dress I'd worn to the service. "Tara," Thomas began, his voice dry and flat, like dust hitting a ledger. "We have concluded Andrew's affairs. As you know, everything he had was in trust, administered by the family foundation. His will, which was drawn up before your marriage, names the Whitmore Foundation as the sole beneficiary." I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold rush of nausea. "What about the apartment? The one we bought together?" I remember my voice sounding thin and small, betraying the hurricane roaring inside me. Evelyn leaned forward, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her eyes cold, flat chips of blue ice. The title was in Andrew's name, Dear. It was a holding asset for the trust. It is now part of the trust. They had legally, mercilessly erased me. There was no severance package, no compassionate allowance, nothing. Andrew had left a separate, small, handwritten note, a final, guilt-ridden gesture. It gave me a box of his old things, a few worn books, some photos, and his favorite set of metalworking tools he used for a hobby he never pursued. "We'll give you 30 days to vacate the premises," Thomas concluded, stacking the papers neatly. "We trust you understand." I got up. My legs felt like lead weights. As I reached the door, Evelyn's voice, a soft, venomous whisper, followed me. It was a parting shot designed to inflict maximum pain. "Perhaps now, Tara, you can find a job more suited to your station. Something simple. The family legacy is secure, at least." That word, simple. It was their final, perfect insult. It implied I lacked the complexity, the intelligence, the depth to belong in their world. or any world of consequence. I walked out of that building and leaned against a cold stone pillar. The injustice wasn't just financial. It was existential. They didn't just take my money. They tried to take my future, my dignity, and my memory of my husband. That was the moment the grief subsided, just enough for the fury to ignite. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from a desperate need for air, for justice. My internal voice was screaming, "They will not win. They will not get away with defining me." I moved into a tiny, forgotten studio apartment on the wrong side of town. The Whitmores were 1,000 miles away, psychologically and financially. For weeks, I did nothing but stare at the four walls. The few boxes I owned sat unpacked. The shame was a blanket, heavy and suffocating. The only things I touched were Andrew's tools. They were beautiful, solid, a tangible connection to the man I lost. The weight of the miniature hammer and the cool metal of the pliers felt grounding. One afternoon, out of sheer desperation to silence the noise in my head, I pulled out a bag of antique glass beads I had bought years ago and Andrew's precision jeweler's pliers. I started stringing. Not just random patterns. I started crafting the stories in my head, the struggle, the pain, the silent resilience. I made a necklace using dark, heavy stones, stones that symbolize the weight of their judgment, contrasting them with tiny, brilliant emerald chips that represented the little sparks of hope left in me. I called it the weight of fortune. When I looked at the finished piece, I didn't see a necklace. I saw a shield. I took a terrible, grainy photo of it on my phone and posted it on a relatively unknown craft site. I didn't expect a single sale. The next morning, I had 3 orders. One customer wrote, "This piece feels like it has a soul. It's beautiful, but it looks like it survived something." That was my epiphany. I wasn't just selling jewelry. I was selling authenticity. I was selling the story of strength forged through struggle. I named the company Ember and Ivy. Ember for the burning fury and resilience that started it all, the fire they couldn't put out. Ivy for the quiet, persistent growth that no one can stop, the roots that spread silently until they break the pavement. My internal monologue during those first 6 months was a constant mantra, a rhythm to the click of the beads. Every knot tied is a debt paid. Every finished piece is a step away from charity case. I expanded to silver wire wrapping, teaching myself the trade from YouTube tutorials and Andrew's old oil-stained books. My hands, once clumsy in the Whitmore's fancy dining room, became precise, driven by a desperate need for perfection. My work wasn't sleek like the imported designer junk the Whitmores bought. It was rich, textured, and deeply symbolic. And the orders kept coming. Viral marketing took over. My pieces appeared on small fashion blogs. People loved the story, the transparency, the raw emotion in the designs. Within a year and a half, Ember and Ivy wasn't a hobby. It was a legitimate, bustling small business. I had 2 contract employees, and I was finally renting a proper workshop. Period. I was profitable. I was independent. But I wasn't satisfied. The revenge I craved wasn't about money. It was about recognition. It was about forcing the Whitmores to acknowledge my worth, even if they never knew they were doing it. It was about showing them that the charity case could build something they could never touch. Period. And then the universe handed me the key. One Tuesday morning, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "This is Charlotte Dubois from Maison du Luxe." My breath hitched. Maison du Luxe. It was the boutique, a temple of exclusivity located in the city's most pretentious, high-end district. It was the kind of place where Evelyn Whitmore bought her annual jewelry refresh. Charlotte was direct. "Miss Harris, we've been tracking Ember and Ivy's organic growth. The pieces have a unique resonance. We are curating a new collection called the Modern Resilience, and we believe your work would be the cornerstone. We want to be your exclusive high street supplier." I felt a sudden, dizzying rush of power. I accepted with a calm, practiced voice. I didn't tell her about the furious tears and the triumphant scream I let out after I hung up. This was it. I was about to enter their world, not through the back door as Andrew's wife, but through the front as an indispensable, sought-after designer. The contract was ironclad. They paid a premium. They required absolute discretion regarding their suppliers. For me, that secrecy was the sweetest part. Months passed. Ember and Ivy flourished under the Maison du Luxe agreement. I expanded my line, designing exclusive pieces only available through the boutique. Pieces that demanded a significant investment. I knew exactly what the Whitmores would seek out, items that signaled status and scarcity. The moment of reconnaissance arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon. I was delivering a new shipment of pieces to Maison Deluxe, the Solstice collection, entering through the discreet staff entrance in the back alley. As I waited for the elevator, I saw them. Thomas and Evelyn Whitmore were emerging from a chauffeured black sedan, right in front of the boutique's massive, ornate windows. Evelyn was wearing a tailored Chanel suit, her nose titled at its usual critical angle. They were laughing with the boutique manager, a nervous-looking man named Julian. I watched, hidden in the shadows of the doorway, as Evelyn pointed directly to the window display. And there, on a plush velvet cushion, was my signature piece, a phoenix heart brooch, a stunning, complicated piece of wire-wrapped gold and obsidian that took me nearly a week to complete. Retail price, over $12,000. It symbolized rising from the ashes, and it was displayed right where Evelyn could see it. I could hear snippets of their conversation through the heavy glass. Evelyn's voice, though muffled, carried that unmistakable tone of entitled ownership. "It's exquisite, Julian. A marvelous piece of design. So rich. I'll take it. And I must know, Julian, who is this designer? Are they European? Old family?" Julian, visibly flustered, replied, "Ah, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm afraid the source is exclusive. They prefer to remain anonymous. Part of the allure of the Modern Resilience. Collection, only for our most discerning clientele." Evelyn, satisfied that the mystery equated to extreme high status, replied, "Of course, mystery is the ultimate luxury. It's certainly a vast improvement on that cheap beaded nonsense you see everywhere now, that little Etsy trash." My hands, clutching the box of new inventory, went icy cold. The words hung in the air. Etsy trash. The anger that ignited in my stomach felt like molten metal. She was buying my blood. Sweat and fury. She was buying the exact opposite of the cheap, beaded nonsense she sneered at. And she was paying an exorbitant price for the privilege of owning a piece of the woman she called a charity case. I watched as Thomas paid for the Phoenix heart brooch, a look of profound, smug satisfaction on Evelyn's face. I didn't move until their car pulled away. Then I adjusted the thick gold cuff bracelet on my wrist. A simple, custom-made Ember and Ivy piece, the original prototype. I walked into the boutique, a silent, unseen victor. The truth was always going to come out. A secret that big, involving people that petty, never stays hidden forever. It happened 6 weeks later. A major national fashion magazine was doing an exclusive piece on the genius behind the Modern Resilience collection, a piece that Maison du Luxe couldn't refuse because of the prestige. I agreed to the profile, but only under the condition that they published my name, my story, and a large, full-page photo of my face. The name, Tara Harris, founder of Ember and Ivy. I didn't hear it from them first. I heard it from Julian, the boutique manager, who called me in a near panic. "Miss Harris, Mrs. Whitmore is here. She's holding the magazine. I think she knows. Please, I don't know what to do." A calm settled over me, deeper and more profound than any fear. I pulled on a perfectly cut, deep emerald jacket, a color that always made me feel powerful, and drove straight to the boutique. When I walked in, the scene was spectacular. Evelyn Whitmore, draped in the very phoenix heart brooch I had crafted, was standing rigid by the counter, the glossy magazine spread open in her trembling hands. Thomas stood beside her, his face a mask of disbelief, his jaw slack. The silence in the boutique was thick, oppressive. I walked right up to them. I stood tall, taller than I had ever felt in Andrew's presence, taller than Evelyn's imperious posture. I didn't yell. I used the quiet, calm voice of an owner, a voice that commands attention precisely because it doesn't need to strive for it. "Tara." "Hello, Evelyn." "Thomas, what a beautiful brooch you're wearing." I remember spending nearly 75 hours on that piece. It's one of my favorites. We call it the Phoenix Heart for obvious reasons. Pause. "Say it." Again. Evelyn turned utterly white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving the precise application of her expensive makeup starkly visible. The veins in her neck were pulsing. The humiliation was pure, undiluted. She was wearing my triumph. "Evelyn," voice shaking, a high-pitched hiss. "But the article says you started on a kitchen table with cheap beads. That's common. You are not exclusive. You are not a designer. You are a—" I cut her off. I gently adjusted the thick, gold cuff bracelet on my wrist, the original Ivy design, letting a fire in my eyes be the rest of the talking. "Tara, I know what you called me, Evelyn. A charity case. You cut me off, took everything, and left me with nothing but a toolbox and a lot of anger. Well, you're wearing that anger now. You're wearing the fire. You valued exclusivity, and I became the only one who could give it to you. You didn't buy a brand. You bought my story." I paused, letting the silence scream. Funny how the tables turn when you build them yourself. This time, I didn't need your approval. I own the table. And thank you, by the way, for your substantial contribution to my Solstice Collection sales. I gave Julian a professional nod and walked out. The moment was complete. They were left, standing in the marble elegance of their own exclusive world, forced to acknowledge that the person they despised most was now their superior, not by birthright, but by will. Leaving that boutique was the most liberating moment of my adult life. It wasn't the satisfaction of seeing Evelyn Whitmore's face, though that was a nice bonus. It was the profound, soul-deep realization that their opinion of me was now utterly irrelevant. For years, their cruelty had been a weight. I felt small, inferior, always fighting to measure up to an invisible, impossible standard. When they took everything, they inadvertently gave me the greatest gift: freedom from their expectations. I learned that true power isn't inherited, it's forged. The pain, the anger, the feeling of being underestimated, those are not weaknesses, they are raw materials. That fury became the fuel, the ember, and the quiet, persistent growth became the strength, the ivy. To anyone listening who is currently being dismissed, overlooked, or actively harmed by someone they used to look up to, do not seek their validation. Do not waste a single moment trying to convince them of your worth. Take that energy, that pain, and reinvest it. Build something they can't touch, something so authentic and so undeniable that they are forced to deal with it on your terms. The real triumph was not the revenge. The real triumph was the simple, profound fact that I no longer needed their table. I had built a better one, and they weren't invited. And that is my story. The story of Tara, the charity case who built an empire of resilience and sold the first piece to her fiercest critic. I want to thank you all for listening to my journey. It was hard to relive some of these moments, but sharing it makes the triumph even sweeter. If you felt a chill when I confronted Evelyn, or if you connected with the struggle of feeling less than, please smash that like button right now. Every like tells me that these stories of earned justice matter. And here's my question for you today. What's the most satisfying moment of validation you've ever had, where you proved a critic wrong? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And of course, if you want more deeply personal, compelling, and satisfying stories of people overcoming injustice and finding their true power, hit subscribe and join the community. Until next time, remember, you don't need permission to build your own table. You just need fire. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you in the next story.